The words still echo in my head sometimes, even after all these years. "You're a burden, Maya. We can't afford to keep supporting you anymore." My mother said it so casually, like she was commenting on the weather. I was 22 years old, standing in the living room of the house I grew up in, holding my college acceptance letter. Little did they know, 10 years later, they'd be standing outside my mansion begging for help while I closed the door in their faces. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Before we dive into this crazy story, if you enjoy family drama and satisfying revenge stories, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Trust me, this one gets wild. Let me back up a bit. I'm Maya, and this is the story of how my parents threw me away like garbage, only to come crawling back a decade later when they saw what I'd become. Growing up, I always knew I wasn't the favorite. That honor belonged to my younger brother, Ethan. He was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. And let me tell you, the favoritism wasn't subtle. When Ethan wanted piano lessons, my parents somehow found the money immediately. When I asked for basic art supplies for my graphic design hobby, I was told we couldn't afford luxuries. When Ethan's car broke down during college, Dad bought him a brand new Honda Civic, just like that. When my bike got stolen when I was 17, I was told to save up for another one myself. I remember standing there thinking, a bike costs $200, his car costs $20,000. But sure, I'm the one who needs to save up. Here's another gem. For my high school graduation, I got a card with $50. For Ethan's graduation 2 years later, they threw him a massive party with catering and invited 50 people. The party alone cost more than $2,000. But somehow, $50 was all they could manage for me. I learned early on to be independent. I got my first job at 15, working at a local cafe after school. Every penny I earned went into my savings account. I had dreams, you see. I wanted to go to college and study graphic design. I wanted to build something for myself, something they couldn't take credit for or give to Ethan instead. By the time I turned 22, I'd been accepted into a really good design program. It wasn't Ivy League, but it was reputable and had excellent industry connections. I'd saved enough for the first semester's tuition by working my ass off for 7 years. But I needed help with housing and living expenses. That's when I made the biggest mistake of my life. I asked my parents for help. I remember that evening so clearly, it might as well have been yesterday. It was a Thursday in late July. The evening was warm, and the cicadas were buzzing outside. Ethan had just finished his second year of college, the one my parents were fully paying for, of course. He was home for the summer, lounging on the couch, playing video games like he always did. I walked into the living room with my acceptance letter, my hands shaking with excitement and nervousness. "Mom, Dad," I said, unable to hide my smile. "I got accepted. The design program accepted me." My father barely looked up from his newspaper. My mother was folding laundry, Ethan's laundry specifically, moving methodically like I wasn't even there. She glanced at me briefly, her face completely blank. "That's nice, dear," she said flatly, like I'd just told her I'd found a quarter on the sidewalk. My smile faltered, but I pushed on. "I was hoping we could talk about it. I've saved enough for tuition, but I'll need some help with living expenses and books. Maybe we could work something out? I could pay you back after I graduate. I could even sign a contract if you want, with interest." That's when my father put down his newspaper. The look on his face made my stomach drop. It wasn't anger. It was worse. It was cold calculation, like he was looking at a financial burden he needed to eliminate. "Maya, we need to have a serious conversation," he said, his voice heavy with false sympathy. "Your mother and I have been discussing this, and we think it's time you became fully independent." I stared at him, confused. "I am independent. I've been working since I was 15. I've barely asked you for anything." "No," my mother interrupted, setting down the laundry and finally looking at me directly. "You're still living here, eating our food, using our utilities. That needs to stop." My heart started pounding. "What are you saying?" "We're saying you're a burden," my father said bluntly, and I swear Ethan smirked a little without looking away from his game. "We can't afford to keep supporting you. Ethan still has 2 more years of college, and that's expensive. We need to focus our resources on him." The room started spinning. But I'm asking for help with my education too, and I've offered to pay you back. Ethan's not paying you back for anything." "Ethan is different," my mother said. And there it was. The truth I'd always known, but never wanted to acknowledge. "He's younger. He needs our support more. You're 22. You should be able to handle this yourself by now." "But Ethan is 20, and you're paying for everything for him. His tuition, his apartment, his car, his insurance, his food, everything." My voice was rising now, years of resentment bubbling to the surface like lava. "I'm asking for a fraction of what you give him, and I'm willing to pay it back." "Don't you dare raise your voice at your mother," my father snapped, standing up. "We've made our decision. We need you to move out. We'll give you 2 weeks to find a place." I looked at Ethan, who was still staring at his video game, but I could see the slight smile on his face. He was enjoying this. My own brother was enjoying watching me get destroyed. "2 weeks?" I whispered, my throat tight. "You're kicking me out with 2 weeks' notice?" "We're not kicking you out," my mother said, but her tone said otherwise. "We're encouraging you to be independent. You're an adult now, Maya. Act like one." I wanted to scream that Ethan was also an adult, but what was the point? They'd already made up their minds. I'd never mattered to them, not really. I was just the practice child, the rough draft before they got it right with Ethan. Those 2 weeks were the worst of my life. I cried myself to sleep every night in my childhood bedroom, surrounded by boxes of my belongings. My parents barely spoke to me except to remind me of the deadline. Ethan avoided me entirely, probably afraid I'd guilt trip him or ask for his help. I felt like a ghost in my own home, invisible and unwanted. I found a tiny studio apartment on the bad side of town. It was all I could afford with my cafe salary. The neighborhood was rough, the building was old, and the apartment itself was maybe 300 square feet. But it was mine, and more importantly, it was available immediately. I had to defer my college acceptance because I couldn't afford housing near the campus. That hurt worse than anything, watching my dream slip away because my parents couldn't be bothered to help me the way they helped Ethan. The landlord, Mr. Chen, was a kind older man who took pity on me when I showed up to view the apartment with red, puffy eyes and a desperate look on my face. "You okay, kid?" he asked as I signed the lease with shaking hands. I broke down and told him everything, the favoritism, the rejection, the 2-week deadline. He listened quietly, nodding occasionally, and when I finished, he did something that made me cry even harder. "I'm reducing your rent by $100 a month," he said firmly. "Pay me back when you make it big. I got a daughter your age. Can't imagine doing what your parents did. That's just wrong." That small act of kindness from a complete stranger meant more to me than anything my parents had ever done. Mr. Chen became my first real father figure, though I didn't know it yet. Moving day came. I loaded all my belongings into my beat-up old car in 3 trips. My parents watched from the porch but didn't help. Ethan didn't even come out of his room to say goodbye. As I drove away from that house for the last time, I looked in the rearview mirror and saw my mother go back inside like nothing had happened. No hug, no tears, nothing. The next few years were brutal, and I mean brutal. I worked 3 jobs to survive. The cafe in the mornings from 6 to 11, a retail store in the afternoons from noon to 6, and freelance graphic design work at night from 8 until whenever I finished. I was getting maybe 4 hours of sleep a night. I lived on instant ramen and rice. Sometimes, if I was lucky, I could afford eggs. My studio apartment had a leaky faucet that kept me up at night, terrible heating that left me shivering in winter, and paper-thin walls where I could hear my neighbors fighting. But it was mine, and I was determined to make something of myself. I taught myself advanced design software through free online tutorials and YouTube videos. I built a portfolio by doing free work for small businesses and nonprofits, sometimes working 20 hours on a single logo just to make it perfect. Slowly, painfully slowly, I started getting paying clients. My freelance work went from making $50 a month to $500, then eventually $2,000. I remember the first time I made $2,000 in a month from design work alone. I cried happy tears for the first time since being kicked out. 4 years after my parents kicked me out, I finally enrolled in that design program. I did it part-time while working. taking out minimal student loans because I was covering most costs myself with my freelance income. It took me 6 years to finish a 4-year degree, attending night classes and online courses while working full-time. But I did it. I walked across that stage with no family in the audience, but I did it. During those 6 years, my parents contacted me exactly twice. Once to invite me to Ethan's graduation party, and once to ask if I could lend them $500 for an interview suit for Ethan. Not give, lend, like I was a bank. I went to the graduation party but sat in the back and left early. Watching them fawn over Ethan, taking hundreds of photos, crying proud tears, it hurt too much. I sent a check for the suit because, despite everything, I couldn't completely let go. Pathetic, I know. After I graduated with my design degree, things changed fast. I landed a job at a mid-size marketing agency as a junior designer. My portfolio was strong because I'd been doing real client work for years, while other new graduates only had school projects. Within a year, I was promoted to senior designer. Within 2 years, I was art director, managing a team of 5 designers. But I wanted more. I wanted to build something of my own, something that couldn't be taken away or diminished. 8 years after being kicked out, I started my own design agency with my savings and a small business loan. I called it Phoenix Creative because I'd risen from the ashes of my old life and rebuilt myself into something stronger. I hired 3 other designers who, like me, had taken unconventional paths into the industry. We understood struggle, and that made us hungry. We specialized in branding for startups and small businesses that bigger agencies ignored. We were good, really good. Our designs were fresh, our prices were fair, and we actually cared about our clients' success. Within a year, we had 20 clients. Within 2 years, we'd expanded to 15 employees and moved into a real office space. By the end of year 3, we were pulling in 7 figures annually. I bought a house. Not a house, actually, a mansion. 4 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, gourmet kitchen, home office, finished basement, 3-car garage. It was in a beautiful neighborhood with tree-lined streets and perfect lawns. I hired an interior designer to make it absolutely perfect. I wanted every corner of that house to scream success because it represented everything I'd built on my own. I also bought a brand new luxury SUV, paid off Mr. Chen's entire building mortgage as a thank you for believing in me, and set up a scholarship fund for students from low-income families pursuing creative careers. The scholarship was called the Phoenix Rising Scholarship, and it paid full tuition plus living expenses. I didn't want any kid to go through what I went through. Through all of this, I'd had minimal contact with my family. The occasional text message on holidays that they'd respond to with 1 word if at all. A brief phone call on birthdays where the conversation lasted maybe 2 minutes. I knew, through social media stalking I'm not proud of, that Ethan had bounced between a few jobs and was now working in sales at some mid-level company. My parents had retired and were living on Social Security and their savings. I never told them about my success, never posted about it on social media where they could see. I kept my life private, separate from them, like a secret garden they weren't allowed to enter. Then, 10 years and 2 months after they kicked me out, they showed up at my door. It was a Saturday morning in October. The leaves were turning orange and red, and there was a slight chill in the air. I was in my home office, reviewing design mock-ups for a major client presentation, when my video doorbell rang. I glanced at my phone to see who it was and nearly dropped my coffee. There they were, Mom, Dad, and Ethan, standing on my porch looking around with wide eyes at my house, my yard, my expensive cars in the driveway. I opened the door slowly, and the looks on their faces were priceless. Pure shock mixed with something I'd never seen directed at me before. Respect. Maybe even envy. "Maya," my mother breathed, looking past me into my house. I watched her eyes take in the marble floors, the crystal chandelier, the expensive furniture visible from the entryway, the original artwork on the walls. "Is this... do you live here?" "Mom, Dad, Ethan." My voice was flat, emotionless. "What are you doing here?" "We wanted to see you," my father said, but he couldn't stop staring at my house. His eyes were calculating, and I could practically see the wheels turning. "It's been so long. Whose house is this?" Ethan asked bluntly, looking around like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Did you marry rich or something? Is your husband home? I almost laughed at that assumption. Of course they'd assume I couldn't have earned this myself. It's my house. I bought it. And I'm not married. I didn't elaborate. I didn't owe them explanations. My mother's mouth fell open. You bought this? This whole house? Yes. What do you want? I didn't invite them in. I stood in the doorway like a barrier, my hand on the doorframe. We were in the area and thought we'd visit, my mother said, but it sounded like a lie. Her voice was too high, too forced. I live 2 hours from their town. Nobody is just in the area 2 hours away. How did you even get my address? I asked, my eyes narrowing. They exchanged guilty glances. We may have asked around, my father admitted, not meeting my eyes. Your old landlord, Mr. Chen, he told us where you'd moved. I made a mental note to call Mr. Chen and find out exactly what he'd told them. He must have felt obligated, but I wished he hadn't. Well, you've seen me. I'm fine. I'm busy. You can go now. I started to close the door. Wait! My mother put her hand out, stopping the door. Please, Maya. Can't we come in? We've driven all this way. Surely you can spare a few minutes for your family. Every instinct told me to say no, to slam the door and call the police if they didn't leave. But curiosity won. I wanted them to see what I'd built. I wanted them to see exactly what I'd accomplished after they threw me away like trash. I wanted to watch their faces as they realized what they'd given up when they chose Ethan over me. Fine, 30 minutes, then you leave. I stepped back and let them in. I watched their faces carefully as they walked through my home, the open-concept living room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking my landscaped backyard, the gourmet kitchen with marble countertops, high-end appliances, and a wine fridge, the reading nook with custom built-in shelves holding hundreds of books, my home office with dual 32-inch monitors, my design awards displayed on the wall, and framed magazine covers featuring my agency's work. Maya, this is absolutely incredible, my father said, and I heard something in his voice I'd never heard before when he talked to me. Genuine respect. It made my skin crawl. What exactly do you do? Ethan asked, staring at my awards wall like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Are you some kind of executive? I own a design agency, Phoenix Creative. We specialize in branding and digital design for startups and established companies. We have 30 employees and annual revenue in the high 7 figures. I said it matter-of-factly, watching their reactions. You own it? My mother sank onto my designer couch uninvited, her hand touching the fabric like she couldn't believe it was real. You're an entrepreneur? You run a whole company? Yes. I built it from nothing. I remained standing, arms crossed, making it clear this wasn't a social visit. Now, you have 28 minutes left. What do you want? They exchanged looks again, and I could see the rehearsed conversation they'd had in the car falling apart now that they'd seen how successful I actually was. It was my father who finally spoke, clearing his throat nervously. The truth is, Maya, we've fallen on some hard times financially. Your mother's medical bills have been piling up, arthritis treatments and medications, and our retirement savings aren't stretching as far as we'd hoped. The house needs repairs we can't afford. We were wondering if I could help you financially, I finished for him, my voice icy. Well, yes, my mother said, her hands clasped together like she was praying. We're family, after all, and you're clearly doing very well for yourself. I laughed, actually laughed. It came out bitter and harsh, and I saw them flinch. Family? You want to talk to me about family? You kicked me out 10 years ago, called me a burden, told me you couldn't afford to support me while you paid for everything, and I mean everything, for Ethan, and now you want my help? We were wrong, my father said quietly, but he still couldn't look me in the eye. We see that now. We should have supported you. We made a mistake. A mistake? My voice was rising. A mistake is forgetting to call on my birthday. A mistake is being late to dinner, Kicking your daughter out and telling her she's too expensive to keep around while funding your son's entire life is not a mistake. It's a choice. You chose Ethan over me, repeatedly, for my entire life. Maya, please. My mother was crying now, tears running down her face. We're sorry. We made a terrible mistake, but we're struggling now and we need help. You think an apology fixes 10 years? You think showing up here after a decade of silence and asking for money is going to make me forget? I was shaking now, years of anger pouring out. I lived in a studio apartment with a leaking faucet and no heat. I worked 3 jobs and slept 4 hours a night. I ate nothing but rice and ramen for 2 years. I taught myself everything because I couldn't afford proper classes. And you know what? I never asked you for a damn thing after you threw me away. But you've done so well for yourself, my mother protested, gesturing around my house. Clearly, it worked out. Maybe we did you a favor by pushing you to be independent. I stared at her, stunned by the audacity. You think you get to take credit for this? You think kicking me out made me successful? I succeeded despite what you did to me, not because of it. Every achievement, every award, every dollar I've earned, I did that myself. You don't get to rewrite history and pretend your cruelty was somehow good parenting. I turned to my brother, who'd been silent this whole time, standing awkwardly by the window. And you sat there playing video games while they destroyed me. You never said a word in my defense. You never called to check on me in 10 years. You never once asked if I was okay. You just took everything they gave you and watched me suffer. Ethan looked at his shoes. I'm sorry. I was young and stupid. You were 20 years old enough to know right from wrong, old enough to have a conscience. I shook my head. But you didn't care because you were getting everything you wanted. My mother stood up, looking around desperately at my beautiful house. But you're our daughter. We raised you, fed you, kept a roof over your head for 22 years. Doesn't that count for something? Don't you owe us anything? Owe you? I was incredulous. Parents are supposed to provide for their children. That's not something I owe you for. That's your basic responsibility. And you only did it until it became inconvenient. The second supporting me interfered with your favorite child, you threw me away. We need help, Maya, my father said, and now he sounded angry. We thought since you're doing well, since you have all this, he gestured around, that you might have some compassion for your struggling parents. You thought you could show up after 10 years and I'd just hand over money? You thought you could see my success and suddenly I'd forget how you treated me, how you made me feel worthless and unwanted? What do you want from us? My father demanded. We said we're sorry. We made a mistake. People make mistakes, Maya. You can't hold a grudge forever. I don't want anything from you. That's the point. I don't need you. I don't want you in my life. You made it very clear 10 years ago that I wasn't worth your time or money, so why should you be worth mine now? I walked to the door and opened it. Your 30 minutes are up. Get out of my house. Just like that? Ethan spoke up, finally showing some emotion. You're not even going to think about it? They're our parents, Maya. Think about what? Funding the retirement of people who told me I was too expensive to keep around? After they funded your entire life while I got nothing? I held the door wider. No. I'm not going to think about it. The answer is no. Maya, please, my mother begged, walking toward me with her hands outstretched. We have nowhere else to turn. We're desperate. That's not my problem. You made your choice 10 years ago. Now live with it. My voice was ice cold. And for the record, there's a reason I didn't tell you about my success. There's a reason I kept my distance. I knew this would happen. I knew the second you found out I'd made something of myself, you'd show up with your hands out. That's not fair, my father protested, but he was moving toward the door. Fair? You want to talk to me about fair? Nothing about my life has been fair. But I survived it. I thrived despite you, not because of you. I gestured to the open door. Now get out of my house and don't contact me again. Maya, we're family. My mother tried one more time, her voice desperate. No. Family doesn't do what you did. Family doesn't abandon their children when they need help. Family doesn't play favorites so blatantly that one child feels worthless. I looked each of them in the eye. Now leave, or I'm calling the police for trespassing. They finally left, but not before my mother tried one more manipulation tactic. "We'll be staying at the Holiday Inn on Route 9 for a few days," she said from the porch, her voice hopeful. "Room 247, in case you change your mind, in case you remember that we're your family and you want to do the right thing." I won't change my mind, and I am doing the right thing. For me. I closed the door in her face. I leaned against the door, my heart pounding, my hands shaking. But I didn't cry. I was done crying over them. I'd wasted enough tears on people who'd never valued me. But it wasn't over. Of course it wasn't. Because my mother is nothing if not persistent when she wants something. 3 days later, I got a call from my Aunt Linda, my mother's sister. We'd never been particularly close, but she'd always been kind to me in a distant sort of way. "Maya, honey, I heard about what happened," she said, her voice careful. "Your mother called me crying. She's very upset." "Did she tell you the whole story?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "Or just the part where I refused to help?" There was a pause. "She told me you wouldn't help them with their financial troubles. She said you have a big fancy house and plenty of money but won't spare anything for your struggling parents." Of course that's what she said. I took a deep breath and proceeded to tell Aunt Linda everything. The years of blatant favoritism, specific examples with dollar amounts, being kicked out at 22, the last 10 years of building my life from nothing while my family ignored my existence, the fact that they only contacted me when they found out about my success. When I finished, Aunt Linda was quiet for a long moment. I could hear her breathing, processing. "I knew they favored Ethan," she finally said, her voice tight. "But I didn't know it was that bad. I didn't know they kicked you out. Oh, Maya, I'm so sorry." "It's not your fault, Aunt Linda. Still, what they did was wrong. Very wrong." She sighed heavily. "But they are struggling, honey. Your mom's medical bills really are pretty bad, and they're not getting any younger." "Then they can sell their house, downsize to something affordable, figure it out like I had to figure it out when they threw me out with nothing." "You're really not going to help them at all? Not even a little? Would you? If someone treated you like that? If someone made you feel worthless your entire life and then only came around when they wanted something?" Another long pause. "No, I guess I wouldn't. You're right." But Aunt Linda's call was just the beginning. Over the next week, I got calls and texts from cousins, family friends, even my grandmother, who I hadn't spoken to in 5 years. My mother had apparently launched a full campaign, painting herself as the victim of an ungrateful daughter who'd abandoned her poor, struggling parents. The story she told them was very different from reality. In her version, she'd encouraged my independence as a young adult to help me grow. She conveniently left out the part where she called me a burden. In her story, they'd supported me emotionally, even if they couldn't help financially, which was a complete lie. And now, in her time of need, her successful daughter was cruelly refusing to help her struggling elderly parents. The texts ranged from passive-aggressive, "I'm sure you have your reasons, but family is important," to outright accusatory, "How can you be so selfish? They're your parents." I was furious, not just angry, furious. I made a decision then that I still stand by. I was going to tell the truth, all of it, publicly. I called a family meeting, not in person, but a group video call. I invited everyone who'd contacted me, plus several family members who hadn't been part of my mother's campaign, but deserved to know the truth. I asked Aunt Linda to arrange it, and she did, though she warned me it might get ugly. When everyone was on the call the next Sunday afternoon, about 15 people in total, I spoke. My heart was pounding, but my voice was steady. "I know you've all heard my mother's version of events," I began, looking at their faces on the screen. "Now you're going to hear mine. And unlike her story, mine comes with evidence." I told them everything. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I stated facts calmly and clearly, like I was presenting a business case. The years of favoritism with specific examples and approximate dollar amounts. Being called a burden. Being kicked out with 2 weeks' notice. Working 3 jobs. Building my business from nothing. Then I started showing evidence. I'd prepared for this. I showed them bank statements from those early years, showing deposits of $30 here, $50 there from my various jobs, while I paid rent and utilities and tried to eat. I showed them my old lease agreement from Mr. Chen with the reduced rent noted and his handwritten message, "For a hard-working young woman who deserves better." I showed them the email I'd sent my parents after my first year of college, asking if they wanted to visit campus or see my work. They'd never responded. I showed them text messages from holidays over the years where I'd reached out with heartfelt messages and gotten one-word replies or nothing at all. I showed them my business incorporation papers, showing I'd built Phoenix Creative with my own money and a business loan I was still paying off. By the time I finished, several family members were in tears. My grandmother looked horrified, her hand over her mouth. Even some of the cousins who'd texted me angrily looked ashamed. "Is this true?" my grandmother asked, her voice shaking as she looked at my parents, who'd been on the call but silent. "Did you really kick her out? Did you really call your own daughter a burden?" My mother was crying, but they were angry tears now. "We thought we were teaching her independence. We thought it would be good for her." "By calling her a burden?" My cousin Sarah, whom I'd always liked, spoke up sharply. "By throwing her out while paying for everything for Ethan? That's not teaching independence, that's favoritism and cruelty." "Ethan needed more help," my father tried to defend, but his voice lacked conviction. "Why?" Aunt Linda asked, her voice sharp. "Because he was a boy? Because he was younger? Maya needed help too, and she actually asked for less than what you gave Ethan. She even offered to pay you back." The call devolved into arguments. Some family members defended my parents, saying I should help them anyway because they're older now and people change and family is forever. Others were furious on my behalf, especially the ones who'd experienced similar favoritism in their own families. But I'd said what I needed to say. "I'm not looking for validation," I interrupted the arguing, "and I'm not asking anyone to take sides or stop talking to my parents. I'm just tired of being painted as the villain in a story where I'm actually the victim. You've all heard the truth now. Make your own judgments. Believe what you want. I'm done defending myself." I left the call and blocked several people who'd been particularly nasty in their messages. The next day, something unexpected happened. My cousin Sarah called me. "Hey, I just wanted to say I believe you 100% and I support you completely," she said. "What they did was unforgivable, and you don't owe them anything. Also, I think what you built is amazing. You're like a phoenix, rising from the ashes. Actually, I have a friend who's starting a business and needs branding help. Can I send her your way?" I was touched, genuinely touched. "Of course. Thank you, Sarah. That means a lot." "And Maya? For what it's worth, you're not a burden. You never were. You're actually kind of my hero now. I've been dealing with favoritism from my own parents, and seeing you stand up for yourself gives me courage." I did cry after that call. Happy tears, for the first time in this whole mess. But the drama wasn't done. Of course it wasn't. A week after the family video call, my parents showed up again. This time they brought Ethan and a new strategy. I saw them on my video doorbell and almost didn't answer. But curiosity got the better of me again. I opened the door, leaving the security chain on. "What?" I asked flatly. "We're not asking for money this time," my father said quickly, holding up his hands. "We just want to apologize properly. Can we please come in and talk?" Against my better judgment, I let them in. But I didn't sit down, and I didn't offer them anything. They stood in my entryway like strangers. "We're sorry," my mother said, and she actually looked sincere. "We realize now how badly we hurt you. We were wrong to favor Ethan. We were wrong to kick you out. We were wrong about everything." I waited. There had to be more. "We were wondering," my father continued, "if we could stay with you for a little while, just until we get back on our feet financially. You have 3 bedrooms. You live alone. It would really help us out, and it would give us a chance to rebuild our relationship." I actually laughed out loud. "You want to move in with me?" "Just temporarily," Ethan added quickly. "Just until they figure things out. It would mean a lot to them, and it's the least you could do after." Thank you so much for watching. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Your support truly means the world to me. And don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments. I love reading every single one of them. Each comment inspires me to keep creating stories for you. See you next time.